so precariously perched. Oh boy.
Now, just now, if you don't mind sharing, you were telling me how that final shot in the water was achieved.
Yeah, we were just over there waiting for the film to end, and the last shot of the movie when I'm underwater, I was whispering that we shot that through a Walmart fish tank, where Mary was like, "Oh, we didn't get the shot that we needed when we had, the like 6 hours of an actual underwater camera and like a guy in scuba gear for safety reasons." And she was like, can we just basically throw you off the dock at the end of the place that you happen to be staying tonight, and like Mike's gonna come with the camera, and I like accidentally wore my wardrobe home and my costume bra home, and I got in the water and Mike was literally just holding the camera in a fish tank doing that, and we were just doing that, and it was like the water was very cold and impossible to see through, and I'm pretty sure that there were like 2 middle school boys on the dock down the thing going, "Is that actress in her bra? Like, what's she doing?" It's all like very nice to see it with the music and stuff, and also amusing that, of course, like indie filmmaking is through a Walmart fish tank that he got earlier that day.
And now, this is the debut feature from Mary Nighy. Do you enjoy working with first-time filmmakers? Like, what is it about first-time filmmakers that maybe you don't get,
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about it much, if I'm honest. I mean, she's so thoughtful and such a, she has like such a sweet, kind of angelic demeanor. She's like, on set I kept calling her my English Rose because she's so soft-spoken, and she would kind of whisper notes to me, and I would be like out on a paddle board, do whatever, doing my thing, and she would sort of like lean in and say this like really beautiful poetic note, and I would be like, "What?" Just like really living up to the reputation of every American on Earth, because I was the only American on set. Everybody else was either Canadian or British. So I was just repping for the USA, being very shrill and loud.
But now you are an executive producer on this film, and what was it about this project that wanted you to sort of take on that extra title, that extra responsibility?
I feel like it's nice to have a little bit of that responsibility and a little more input, because I'll give it whether I'm supposed to or not, unfortunately. And this was a really personal project to me, so I was very grateful to be involved in the edit more than I'd been involved in any other film, even if I was an EP on it. I've seen so many cuts of this movie. But one thing that became really important to me as we were editing was something that Wunmi, who plays Sophie, she said to me the first day that we met. We were talking about the movie, and she was talking about how she was so excited to see my performance, which was such a generous thing to say, and we were talking about the script, and I was like, oh, I love that it really sticks with this character rather than kind of taking the easy way out and like cataloging a bunch of evidence of the bad behavior. And she said, but Anna, you're the evidence. And that was a really powerful thing to hear. She was talking about the performance, but that's my work in recovery now, is to trust my own perceptions and my own experience. And it was important to me that as much as possible, we didn't rely on the footage of Simon behaving badly, and that we trusted that the audience would take Alice as the evidence, that the impact that it had on her and that her experience was enough evidence. So being able to try to encourage just peeling that back as much as possible was important to me for the movie, and I think important to me personally, because it felt like a validation of the idea that we can take the impact that something has had on a person as evidence. Because if we want to get technical, unless they have like a personality disorder where there's a perceptual problem or whatever, there's exceptions to every rule. I'm just saying, that's the idea.
Because it's one of the things that's so fascinating about the movie and about your performances, there's this kind of exploration of like the public self versus the private self, and like what we're sort of putting out to everybody else and what you're going through internally. And what was it like for you to sort of navigate that with this part?
I mean, I think the moments where Alice is alone were really interesting. If anything, I'm not used to trusting that if I'm actually having the internal experience, that I can trust that the audience will go along with that. I think I've been working really hard to become an actor that works really well within the technical, logistical challenges of filmmaking. I've always wanted to be that kind of actor and be the kind of person who like can feel the camera operator like drop his shoulders and know like, okay, I think I know what he needs me to do to make this shot work, even when we're in the middle of a take. And to kind of shed all of that for this was challenging but rewarding, and being in those really intimate moments where frankly a camera was so close to my face, and like trusting that I could just drop all of that and I didn't have to ever indicate, was really exciting, and part of the reason that I wanted to do something that was so intimate and so restrained.
Because it's so interesting how it makes Alice in some ways like an unreliable narrator. Like it's difficult to know how to read her. And was that something that you liked about the part?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, like if that's how you feel watching the movie, then like you're getting a glimpse into the experience of being in a psychologically abusive relationship, because you're not sure if you're a reliable narrator or not. So when people talk about like, oh yeah, halfway through the movie, like I wasn't sure if Alice was kind of making it all up. That makes me really happy actually, because it feels like you've achieved the confusion that is being in the middle of something like that. And oh shoot, I had a second part of that answer. I can't remember. Wait, what was the question? Sorry, I get nervous.
It was Alice is kind of an unreliable narrator.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think that her being in the first like 10 or 15 minutes, like, or maybe longer than that, being like kind of no fun to be around as a viewer and as a character, as a friend in this movie, that I didn't want it to be like, oh, she's just constantly this doe-eyed victim, lamb, vulnerable, that like there are moments where like she's really cold to her friends and she's kind of a bummer, and that again, even with like qualities that aren't that great, not that attractive, that the audience would still invest in her and wish well for her, was another kind of like leap of faith, rather than being like, but she's so nice and her boyfriend's so mean, don't we love her? That she is complicated and sometimes kind of bitter and strange and has like weird moments that are very unattractive was important to me.
Because just the energy of this performance is so different from the kind of antic comedic things that you're kind of best known for. And what was it like for you to kind of recalibrate a performance in that way?
It was weird, especially because this was the first movie that I did after COVID. It was the first thing that I did after, because I had told my team that I needed to take like a mental health break before COVID, because again, I thought I was the problem. So it was a weird thing to kind of trust my own barometer when I'm trying to strip off every like sort of tool in my toolbox that I've built, and also like I haven't worked in a year and I'm used to working all the time, so I was really worried that I had like kind of miscalibrated things and didn't know what was or wasn't coming across. And this is always weird to say, especially when you just watch the movie, but Charlie, who plays Simon, is just the loveliest human being. And he was really a great ally in that. It was equally important to him to not be pushing and going for the obvious choice. And I think that he really got himself to a place of trying to believe that Simon was the victim, and I was trying to like get to a place of believing that Alice is the perpetrator, and that's what made those scenes kind of juicy. And I think that there were days where some people at Video Village were like, but it's not how we think of these relationships, you know? But there were so many people on set, almost exclusively people on set, who came to the movie because they'd experienced something like this. And so it felt really important to bring that knowledge in and to try to honor how murky and confusing it gets when you're actually like in that situation. And it like, yeah, the person is never going to twirl their mustache and tie you to railroad tracks. So, yeah.
But now, when you say as an actor you kind of wanted to strip away like the tools in your toolbox that you sort of already knew, what do you mean? Like, what sort of things are you talking about?
Oh man, I guess it's hard to describe. It's like, and again, it sounds like cheap or something, but it's stuff that I really like about the medium, because it's not theater, and I like theater, but you know, just knowing like, oh, like what lens are you on, and knowing, oh, I think you know, my movements need to be slower, and my eye line needs to be higher. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like stuff like that, where you're like, that just is so in my brain at this point. And knowing that like, oh, you know, maybe there's a scene where like the scene's not totally working, but I think that if I do this thing, I can make my scene partner laugh, and then I'll do this thing, and then the editor will have a cut point. Like, I'm always sort of acting for the edits. Like, I'm thinking about like, what are cut points, and how do I make the director's life easier, and how do I, you know, like be just such a star student team player, and like wanting to be such a fucking apple polisher, and yeah, like just not wanting to be thinking about the technical side of it and just be thinking about my job, which is hard because, you know, sometimes you get like hyper vigilant and you start to invade other people's jobs, which, Anna, no one asked you to fucking do that.
But also it must be hard because it sounds like what you're trying to get to, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't really understand acting. Like, to me, it's like a mysterious dark art.
Oh, great.
And like some of it is a thing where you are being like very sort of selfish and like internal, and just everybody else just sort of has to deal with it, and maybe they capture it on camera, maybe they don't. And it sounds like for you that's like a hard place to be. Like that's not how you think of performing, but here you were trying to a little bit.
Yeah,
trying
well,
to be selfish.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it was also, I mean, we had the luxury of, well, I guess I was doing it to a degree, because as I'm saying, and well, we had the luxury of like shooting handheld, which means you have a little more freedom. And like natural light, and so it's all like lit 360, so I can do whatever the fuck I want. Yeah, I think it's not so much that I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do it and not worry about anybody else on set. It was more like, I just kind of know the face they want me to fucking make. I know what gets them to go, great, that was great, let's move on. You know, like I know how to be the apple polisher and like get the gold star and make everybody behind Video Village go like, that was great, we got, oh, and that last take was like great. And I knew that there would be scenes where everyone was like, okay, I guess that was it. And especially like toward the beginning of the film. And I wanted to trust that it was going to be a whole performance that built, and that in itself was this kind of exercise in self-trust for me, because that was what was lost, and that's part of, you know, that will be my recovery for many years. So like just trusting that even if I wasn't getting the kind of attaboys, that I knew what I wanted to put on screen. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, completely. Because one thing I find really interesting is how, as much as it is this examination of emotional abuse, it also becomes this very sweet portrait of friendship. And with you and with Wunmi and with Kaniehtiio, that did you guys have much time to rehearse or like hang out, or like where did that chemistry that the three of you have like come from?
Yeah, I mean, those girls are magic, first of all. So I think that was a big part of it. Like, Wunmi is a person who, like, if she walked in this room, you would all be like, I think this is my new best friend. So she just radiates light and warmth and, you know, invites you in. And Kaniehtiio, like, could not be more the opposite. She is like this tall, badass, stoic, sarcastic, dry woman, and I'm obsessed with those kind of people. So my mission became like, if you like could make Kaniehtiio laugh, it was a great day. So basically followed her around set like a baby bird, which like she claims to hate, but then like I think she kind of loved. So yeah, I was just so in love with both of them, and they. Again, like they couldn't be more different, but I think they actually walked away from the movie with the strongest friendship. And we had some time to rehearse, like more than you would usually have on a budget like this. But I think it also helped that Wunmi and I were in quarantine for 2 weeks across from each other, because at that time, to enter Canada, you had to do a very, very strict quarantine for 2 weeks. Not like, you know, like isolate, like you actually had to stay in one room, and like they'd send the government to check on you. So we could kind of put our feet at the edge of the dock of the place that we were staying and have chats, but that was it. Like other than that, we were like inside watching Netflix. So it was really that's where we ended up, you know, talking about the movie and yeah. So I got to know her a little bit more before we both met Kaniehtiio. But yeah, I think like there's something really sweet about like opposites attracting. And I think there was a day where we were in a van going to set, and Wunmi was like, okay, we should do a thing where we sing songs from shows, and the first person to guess what song you're singing wins. And Kaniehtiio was like, you're such a fucking theater kid. And you're like, oh, they love each other. Like, where they would just like kind of butt heads, but in the sweetest way.
And now, I mean, one of the kind of lighter moments in the movie is when the three of you are in fact singing Lisa Love's Stay. And did you have anything to do with choosing that song?
So I didn't choose the song, it was always in the script, but again, I was the only American on set, and so I think that song was like big everywhere, but not the way that it was like huge in the States. So I had to explain to Kaniehtiio, who's Canadian, and to Wunmi, who's British, that because they were like learning the lyrics. They were like, we're ready for the karaoke scene, we're ready for the, you know, walking down the street scene, we're learning the lyrics. And I was like, oh, there's a thing you need to know, which is that there's a point in the song where nobody knows the lyrics, and you just kind of, who was dying since the day they were born, yeah. And like, that was like such a funny, specific thing to know as the only American on set. So that was my contribution.
And now there's a moment when the three of you are like kind of having an argument, and you really start to like spiral out, and you're almost like hyperventilating, and it besides being a little, you know, extremely unnerving to watch, just as a performer, like what do you do to like get to that place?
Man, you're asking like really hard, because it's hard to put into words. Yeah. It also feels, oh man, sorry, I was about to say something weird. No. Well, like, I don't know, it feels like asking somebody like, oh man, no, some of you are recording, I can't say that. But you know, it feels like asking how you know, do certain things, like if you, and then suddenly you do, you know? And like,
let me put it a different way.
You know what I'm saying? It's like it's like it's a sense memory thing. It's yeah, I don't know. It's like, it almost feels like in naming the thing, I would seek to destroy it.
Right.
You know? So it's really hard to say, but it's also very weird thinking about that day, because it was really hard physically, but it was also fun. Like, I feel really bizarre saying that, but there was something really rewarding about that day. Yeah. And
did you end up just doing a lot of takes?
I mean, on a budget like this, what is a lot of takes? You know, you go until you have it. But I think like it was certainly, that was a day that I was like really in tune with Mike, who was the DP and the camera operator, because I was like, I just can't be thinking about the camera. And it was like, we had to just be so like wired into each other, especially in the bathroom. It was such a tight space. So like knowing when, like rather than kind of like trying to feel the camera in my periphery, just like kind of energetically knowing like that he was on my rhythm meant that like, okay, I know we have that, and I can stand up and I can like run the water and, you know, be in my own experience and trust that he's like on the same wavelength as me.
I know before we take some questions from the audience, I'm going to ask you just one more thing, which is simply, you just finished shooting your first film as a director, and what has it been like for you to sort of take that step forward? And do you feel like from, you know, your time as an actor that you had a lot that you could sort of bring to being a director?
Yeah, I mean, it was really scary. We were just talking about this a little bit, that I didn't know that I was going to direct it until like 6 weeks before prep started. So it was really, really terrifying, but also felt like the only way I was ever going to like push myself off the cliff and do it. And I have not had so much fun in years. It was so incredible, and I'm just over the moon about it. And I think what surprised me actually is that I felt like a lot of people were like coming up to me, and non-actors would come up to me and be like, oh, I didn't know you were allowed to say that kind of thing to actors. I feel like there's so much like mythology about like what you can and can't say to us. Like, we are children, we are like barely human beings, I totally get it. But people act like it's like a mystical like unicorn where if you breathe the wrong way it'll like disappear into smoke or something. So yeah, I was like fascinated to kind of see the other side of like this delicate mythology around acting. It was great.
And we have time for a couple questions. Anybody? Yep, right back there.
Hi. So,
I was going to go back there and then I'll go back.
Yeah, I just want to say, firstly, you were so wonderful in this film, and
thank you.
you just smashed it.
Oh, thank you.
Secondly, I was curious about what the script looked like, and then how the process was. Did you get it, and then go, I want to executive produce this, and then how much did it change till we get to this point right here?
And the question had to do with the development process, like from what was the script like when you got it, and then how did it change before production?
The script was pretty similar to what's on screen. I think honestly the only big change was like there was a kind of subplot about like a health scare or something that the film just ended up not needing, but like you totally see how a screenplay needs it because it's already so sparse and lean. But honestly, Alana really achieved something in the screenplay, which is like this kind of, I mean, you read so many scripts and she was so willing to have such lean, sparse dialogue, but even the action lines were very lean and they felt really like poetry, and there was such evocative imagery in it that it felt like she built such an atmosphere that everybody that showed up on set was like in the same movie. I've definitely been on sets where I'm in a scene with someone and I'm like, oh no, you're in a totally different movie than me. Am I right? Are you right? We'll find out. Like, which movie is it? And everybody was really clear on like the tone because she really got that across in the screenplay. And if anything, I think there were drafts that came through as we got closer to filming where Simon's behavior got suddenly amped up a little bit. And it became, and I suddenly was like, can I have Alana's number? Because at that point we hadn't spoken personally. And I just FaceTimed her and was like, talk me through this. Because she was doing a very diplomatic thing at first, which was going, I just felt like, I just wanted to, and it was like, I don't think he did. I think this was a note. And it was, of course, one of those things where the more you dig into it, the more everybody's going I don't know where that note came from. It wasn't me, it was, but yeah, I mean, obviously she wrote this out of her own experience as well. So it was kind of a uniquely shitty thing for both of us to feel like, okay, so he has to shove her into a wall for it to be abusive. That was something that we were kind of grappling with and always trying to pull back on and trust that it would be scary and anxious without a physical element.
And we have a question right here.
Oh, hi. First, I want to say I love the film.
Thank
You
you.
did a great job. And so my question is about in terms of like producing and like your transition to your directorial debut. So like when you did like Love Life and this one, so as a producer, how did you have those experiences and then apply that to your directorial?
So the question has to do with some of the other projects that you've been working on as a producer and how you've been sort of like bringing those lessons forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've, it was funny, the A camera op, Sasha, on the movie I just directed, said something to me that I realized, like, oh, that's not the first time somebody said that to me, where he was like, I don't know, I don't even remember the moment, but, you know, I think a bunch of people thought that they were kind of solving a sneaky problem over here, and at one point Sasha was like, fuck, you just see everything, because I'm nosy. I think, again, it's like, comes from just like that hypervigilance thing, which you can argue it's good or bad, but I think that like just having more access as a producer to the dailies and to the first edit and the second edit and stuff was like just you know, even more access to like seeing, oh, that's where they started, and of course like they ended up, you know, just like losing that big Steadicam winner because they never got one that actually worked, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, Love Life was especially educational because we were really like laying the track in front of the train as we went, and seeing the way that like you think you know what the story is, and then it just tells you what it is. You know, I felt like that happened a bunch on the movie I just finished, where I was absolutely certain that the movie was this one thing, and it kept telling me it was something else. And the more I tried to fight it, the more it was like, sorry, babe, it's this other thing. So that was, and like Love Life really helped me just go like, okay, then that's fine. It'll be what it wants to be.
And before we wrap up, just I know for myself, just the first thing I ever saw you in was Camp, where you have your showstopper number, Ladies Who Lunch. And I'm just wondering, you know, we lost Stephen Sondheim last year. I don't know if you ever actually met him, or, you know, if you've kind of reflected on that any since his passing.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really bad day. Like, obviously I didn't know him well, but I got to work with him on Into the Woods. He was rewriting the song lyrics for Cinderella's song, just to update them to the present tense, which is not like a big rewrite, but it meant that he was like in the booth coming in and handing me little notes and stuff, and that was exciting. And before that, I did a production of A Little Night Music at New York City Opera when I was 17, and because I had met him on Camp, he came over like in front of like the 20-year-olds who were in the cast, and he was like, "It's nice to see you again, Anna." And I was like, fuck yes. Because I was just like, oh my god, I'm like the little kid. I'm 17, but I'm like playing a 13-year-old girl. I'm playing like a little kid, and like Sondheim knows who I am, and he just said hi. And when I met him on Camp the very first time, he watched we had already shot me singing Ladies Who Lunch, and the director showed him the performance, and I was like, oh my god, what did he say? And he said, "She has great teeth." And I'll take it. And I was like, okay. Honestly, at the time, like now, looking back, I'm like, that feels like kind of a read. But at the time, I was just like, oh, he said I have great teeth. That's amazing.
And with that, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Everyone, please join me in thanking Anna Kendrick.